Joining us now is the author of 30 books of humor, inspiration, trivia, children's history, and LGBTQ topics. A former publishing industry executive, she's worked for various publishers and was the executive vice president, creative partner at Franklin Spear, the publishing advertising agency. She's a devoted pickleballer and was recently featured on CBS Saturday Morning segment about the sport. Her latest book, Pickleball is Life, The Complete Guide to Feeding Your Obsession, shares the passion behind this global sports sensation. We're thrilled to welcome Erin McHugh to Sports Talk New York. Welcome, Erin.
Good afternoon, gentlemen, and I love your backgrounds. Why do I have just a stupid Christmas tree?
So, it's so interesting about the inspiration for this book. Can you share that story with our audience, why you decided to write this book?
I hurt my hand, is how it happened. And I was in a cast. And so I wrote to my agent. Well, I wrote to her like this. I typed to her like that, right? One finger in another hand. And I said, what? They said I have to be in this cast for 10 weeks. This is about 5 days into being in a cast. I said, I think I should write a book about pickleball. And she plays. And I got a one-word response from her, which of course was, duh. And so off I went and I wrote the proposal. In the meantime, as much fun as I had and how quickly I was trying to write the proposal, because it became clear this would have been last November. It became clear that now was the hour to be writing a pickleball book and to, make it hurry, hurry, hurry. And so I started doing that, and I really worked on it day and night. And then I had to take a little bit of a breather. And now about 9 days into having a cast, I thought, I'm not going to last. And so I went out and I started to play with my other hand, which was a challenge, but a really interesting brain challenge. And then, of course, you have to sort of mete out your friends, because not everybody wants to play with you. You're starting all over again. So, I try to, like, oh, I'm going to ask Mark one day, and then I'll wait 4 days to ask Arnold, and then it'll be like that. So, so it was a lot of fun, and I tried to make it. You guys have seen the book. I tried to make it sort of half source book and half humor, and really gifty. So, it's really a lot of fun, I think. At least that's the feedback I'm getting.
Yeah, it certainly is. And what's really amazing, the sport itself is less than 60 years old. And, AJ and I have written books, and, you have those moments. And for me, I have to imagine this had to be a very cool moment. You're actually able to track down the driving force behind the creation of the game. So tell us about what role Frank Pritchard played in the creation of the game. And what was it? I mean, for me, it would be like being able to sit down and speak to Abner Doubleday. So tell me about how that came.
Which I think is impossible, but it was fascinating. Of course, all the three gentlemen, the three dads that invented the game are now gone, but the third one, Barney McCallum, who really was the driving force behind keeping the love alive for pickleball and helping to spread the word, though all three of them were sort of ambassadors for pickleball in their own way. Barney just died 3 years ago at 91, I think, and he was active until the end about keeping the love alive and appearing places and stuff like that. But I managed to find the daughter, whose name is Allison Bellwood, so she's Bill Bell's daughter, and I emailed her, and I had actually met her a couple of times, and she said she lives nearby me in the summer. And I said, I wonder if I could talk to you about pickleball. And I thought, these people must be so tired of this by now. I cannot tell you guys what wonderful stewards these families are for promoting the sport and getting, and being excited and amazed at what's happened. And so I talked to her, and she said, oh, but I've got to put you in touch with Frank, who is the son of Joel Pritchard, who ended up being a congressman. So, those two families are still very close all the years later. And so, Frank, I thought that maybe their stories would be very different because history, but like you said, it's incredible. You hardly ever get to go back to meet an Abner Doubleday, to have it actually be called history, but find somebody who's still alive who can help you out. And so I thought, well, their stories will be completely different. You know what, you guys, they weren't really. They were, there'd be a little detail here or there And I thought they might say, yeah, well, that summer was a long time ago. Nope. Allison first right off said, I remember the whole day completely. I remember the first minute it started. And Frank was the original kid who was 13 years old, and he was really a 13-year-old boy. He was just, scuffing around this island, Bainbridge Island, and saying, it's so boring here. I've got nothing to do. And his dad said to him, when we were kids, just what you hate to hear from a parent. When we were kids here, we made up our own games. And of course, Frank jumped right on and said, oh, yeah, really? Okay, you go invent a game for us then. And off he went. And that's how it started. And everybody got involved right away. And they started to play every day on this one court that was an old badminton court on one of the properties. And it just took off from there. And, of course, as I say, it was on this small island, but the people on the island started to play it. And then they would have friends come visit. And maybe the friend was from Arkansas, New York, or Massachusetts. And they went back and sort of started it up. So you'd find pockets of this from the 60s on around the country.
So in keeping with the baseball metaphors, so you kind of, I would say you did the equivalent of debunking Babe Ruth's called shot. The urban legend about the name of the sport. Tell us how that came about and what the urban legend is and what the truth is.
Yeah, it is pretty funny because everybody, so, there have been some articles around that just sort of, the same rehash over and over again about pickleball and Bainbridge Island and stuff. But again, getting a hold of these people was key. There was a dog named Pickles, but the dog named Pickles came 3 years after the invention of the sport. And so the dog was named after the sport. The Pritchards they had met at Marietta College before they married, and there's a really active crew team there. And so they were both interested in crew, and Mrs. Pritchard, whose name was Joan, said, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of a pickle boat, which is, I guess when you're doing crew, there's a bunch of leftover people, maybe they're not the best. And they all get put in the same boat, and that's always been called the pickle boat. So it's not necessarily a term that anybody would know unless they were aficionados of crew. So they started calling it pickleball because of the pickle boat. Then they moved to Washington State, where, of course, in the University of Washington, if you've ever read Boys in the Boat, has a very, famous crew team and legend. So 10 years went by before the sport got any sort of spark of interest at all. And somebody from a national newspaper sent the National Observer, I think it was, sent somebody out to the island to say, go look and see what this crazy thing is. And so he interviewed people, and the families talking to him said, it's funny, people are calling it pickleball, and we call it pickleball, but people think it's because of our dog, which came all these years after. And the guy said, oh, that's a good story. Let's just go with that story. So fake news back in the 60s, right?
That's a publicist talking.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
So pretty funny. So it's stuck.
So you mentioned the fact that it was created on a badminton, court. It's kind of a mashup of three sports, ping pong and tennis. But let's throw another one in there, because the very first ball used when the game was invented was a wiffle ball.
That's right.
But most recreational pickleballers might not even be aware of it, that there are two different types of regulation balls. What are the differences between the two?
There are indoors and outdoor balls, and people get confused by the outdoor ball because many different manufacturers make them, and they will have a different weight, which some are better in wind. They may have a different hole size, but they have to have 40 holes. If you play indoors, you play with a ball that has 26 holes. Because you don't want these 26 large holes when you're playing outdoors and it's a little windy. So,
Full disclosure here, I dabble at pickleball, but I'm not obsessed with it. My wife, on the other hand, totally hooked, and she really loved it when, for one Mother's Day, I think I gave her pickleball jewelry. I'm not sure whether it's the game itself or the people she now hangs out with, or the new friends that she and something I made. So my question is, what is it about pickleball that seems to create new friendships? Or is it the other way around? Are people looking for new friendships, finding pickleball is the way they can find them?
I think that's a good point. When I was talking to Allison and Frank, I asked the same question. I said, "What do you think it is?" I mean, no one seems to be able to put their finger on it. What is it that makes it so obsessive? Makes it so fun? She said, "I think because it's for everybody. Everybody can go out and learn, and you can go and spend half an hour instead of 6 hours playing golf. But uh, and the socializing is a load of fun. And I'm sure you guys know that because of the pandemic, that was one of the things that made the sport grow so much. Because if you were in your little hub in your house with your parents and the 3 children and somebody's boyfriend who's now living with you, you could at least get out of the house and go do something together and get to be outdoors and get some exercise, and so it grew a lot like that. But I've thought a lot about the why is pickleball is life, and the questions that you're saying that you ask about your wife, and I've been thinking to myself, what I really wonder is, why isn't life more like pickleball? Because pickleball it's so accessible. It's usually free. You can play in a park. You meet new people. You get outdoors. You can always improve. I mean, who doesn't want life to be like that? To be able to be like improving life all the time.
So one of the things you write about in the book are a lot of the unusual rules. And I have to admit, I learned, some rules I didn't know about on pickleball. So what is the obscure rule that you find the most fascinating, and how has knowing these rules changed the way you play?
It's funny about this, about knowing the rules. I will say that when we all started, the people I play with around here, and that circle has grown. None of us knew. One person said, "Let's get together and try this game. I might know how to score," which of course is, already a thing of its own. So we played, I noticed, for a couple of years before people would say, "Well, you know what? If you get hit by the ball, really, it's our point." So everybody was pretty forgiving for a long time. We're now saying, you got a foot fault going on there. You got to keep your feet off the line. You stepped in the kitchen. That's a no. So you notice that people are getting a little more, I don't want to say contentious, a little less following the rules a little more. But you're right. There are some weird ones, and like tennis, getting hit by the ball is if I serve and my serve goes awry and it hits the other person on the other part of the court, that's still my point. So and there are lots of crazy rules like that. Like there's for example, an over and back point. So if I serve a short ball over the net, a dink, and I put so much spin on it that it comes back to me without them hitting it, my point. And I'm going to stop playing before I screw it up.
It's interesting because you touched on it, and it's one of the rules that I still struggle with, and it's scoring. And you did a pretty good job of explaining the scoring in the book, but you also offer some tricks to remember the order of the numbers in the score. Can you share that with us?
I think what we usually do, what I usually do, and I find a lot of people do, is if you've got it, it's almost like you do your own sign language. You say it's good. So the point system is 3 points, 3 numbers rather, and you say your team's points, the other team's points, and which of server is serving, 1 or 2. Because then that's how it works. It's not rally scoring, although there's some talk of that changing. You only score when your side is serving. So I will usually point to myself, put my hand on my own chest so I don't forget, and I'll say 2, point across the net, say 4. Those people have 4. Back to me, 1. I'm number 1 server. And the rule has been, interestingly enough, that you probably know this, that you have to say the score, and that's another thing that we've been calling people on as time goes on. You have to say the score before you serve. That's a rule. If you don't say it, technically you lose the point. So I will say the score. Now, the USAPA, the U.S. American Pickleball Association, got a phone call recently or an email saying, I play with a man who is a mute. May I say his score for him? Yes. I mean, what's good? Of course you can. So then now the rule has to be changed that either you or your partner can say the score.
You talk about the formation of professional pickleball leagues, with teams owned by celebrities, and it's a big thing now. Recently, there was even a televised celebrity pickleball tournament, and it was an embarrassment.
I thought so.
It was unwatchable. But how do you think having a professional league will affect the game? I think people will watch pickleball like they do tennis. Will it increase awareness and play, or what do you think it'll do?
Interesting, and I want to know what you guys think too. And you talk about this a lot as the game is over and you're standing at the net. Somebody will say, "I saw that celebrity tournament," and everybody to a person agreed it was an embarrassment, and it's certainly not going to get people to play pickleball. It's going to make them think, "What a ridiculous thing." But the Major League Pickleball stuff and them joining up with the professional pickleball people, when when anything is a nascent thing, there's always trouble in paradise. But that helped that they combined forces, I think. And now there's a lot of pickleball on TV, as you know. There's it's on ESPN, it's on CBS Sports, it's on the Tennis Channel at different times. So you can watch. And we were talking yesterday I was talking with some friends saying, one of the things about pickleball in person is it's almost as much fun to watch people play as it is to play itself, which is I think unusual. But I don't find that as much watching it on TV. And we were speaking about, that it'll get a little more, that there will be more people attending, that it'll be a little more sophisticated. Maybe the camera work will be a little better. Even as recently as a couple of years ago, I heard one of the commentators commenting on women's outfits and how cute they were, and I thought, this is not 1956. Have you ever heard of Billie Jean King? This is not going to fly. So I noticed that they've gotten a little more sophisticated in their coverage. So everything, the growth of it is always going to be, have its bumps. And the same is happening, as I'm sure in towns where people are playing in neighborhoods near houses and there's complaints about noises. And of course, the industry is working on paddles and balls, both that are much softer. Different places are trying to figure out hours that you can play pickleball and hours that you can't, so that people don't, may not have to hear it if they live too close. So, bumps and grinds along the way.
So I have a friend who actually lives up in your neck of the woods. He lives in Meredith, New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. He's a tennis player. And he complains at length about the pickleball players who are cutting in on his tennis court times and taking over the courts. Right. Do you see a widespread animosity between pickleball players and tennis players?
That's a good question. I'd say yes and no. You hear about these places in Florida that have 84 tennis courts, and they'll say, "Could we have 7 to play pickleball?" No, come on, But and maybe you divide it up again into parts of the day. I have a court behind me here that's a tennis court, and we've put lines on the court for pickleball on one side and a portable net. Play what you want, just sign up. Now it turns out more people play pickleball here, but that can change any minute. If you've got to figure it out. You've got to find, if it's a playground, you've got to find a time when kids can play in the playground and when people can play pickleball there. Come on, it's all about being fair and sharing. Let's do it. Same about the tennis. There's a lot of tennis players are now playing pickleball, so that has cut down a little bit on the animosity, I think. But there's got to be a way to figure out how everybody can win. I think that's life, man.
So it's interesting because, as with all recreational sports, there always seems to be those unique personalities, whether it be the sneakerhead recreational basketball player, the 100% coordinated golfer with his gloves, his pants, and his shirt, the softball player that always has the best cleats, bats, and gloves. You go to great lengths to describe the pickleverse and
Right.
classify the different types of players. Can you just share a few of those with our audience?
Well, I think, there are people that are like, they got sort of a ninja look, they arrive all in black. Everything is super expensive. It's very sleek. They've got an expensive bag. Their look could kill you. So there's that kind of, they arrive ready to scare, I think. And there are the newbies who are, they're all glad-handed and ready to play and bring lots of balls and bring extra snacks for everybody. There's that kind of player. Lots of people, well, most people come sort of dressed to be comfortable. That will probably change too. But even when you see the pros on TV, as you guys have, they may wear some gear from somebody who was their endorser. But in general, they don't look like they're going out to, in a $500 outfit. It's also goes a little along the lines of people say, well, I don't want to play outdoors. It's too cold. You know what? It's never too cold for pickleball, but you can dress wrong. You just have to keep taking off the layers. I played earlier today and I took off 3 layers by the time I was done, but then I was comfortable. I took off my gloves. I put on my gloves. Who knows? So, you can sometimes get an eyeful of who the person is, how the person's going to play or what they think of themselves. That doesn't mean that they're terrific players by the way that they dress.
You have a great illustration in the book of the woman in her yellow rain slicker as well.
Right.
About the weather one. So here's my issue totally on a personal level. My wife and I did a pickleball clinic at our local JCC, 10 weeks to learn the game. And, the instructors taught us the fine points, the two shot, the drop shot. And they kind of told us that the game is played in the kitchen and it's all about dinking until the other person makes a mistake.
Yeah.
So that's what we learned. That's how we played that 10-week clinic. Every single time I pass by a court, I stop and watch because I still have not yet, gone down to a court. Because of this, I watch, and these people are playing the sport like tennis. They're smashing it and doing long volleys. And I'm saying to myself, okay, that's not the game I was taught. And now I'm kind of intimidated to go down there. So how do you find like-minded players? How do you jump into the pickleverse? The way now was I taught the right way, or maybe I was taught the wrong way? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. That's all an interesting question. And when you watch the pros, you'll see they do this cross court dinking, be 25, 35 shots until somebody hits a little bit high, then bang, that starts. But a lot of people, especially those who have played tennis in their past, will act like what we call them bangers. They're just going to bang it and try to win that way. And a lot of it has to do with just trying to show off that you've got a lot of strength and you've got a lot of background and rackets, but that's not going to make you win. How to find people, that's I think something that's going to change everywhere you go. But I'll tell you one place in particular that pays a lot of attention to what you're saying. If you guys are on Long Island, so if you ever go into the city, go up to Center Park in the 97th Street tennis courts, and back of those are some handball courts. And they set up every day in the morning. In the summertime, they'll set up at 8:30. They'll finish at 8:30 at night when it gets dark. And people come and go. They will have maybe a court over here for people who are beginners. They absolutely have a court over there, and that's in that corner that they say, if you want to play it, if you want to bang it, you have to play over there. So, so the rest of the people they are all, and I bet 150 people come and go through there a day in the summer. They will all practice on their finesse and their placement. And that's how they play the game in Center Park, or you're given a talking to. You're playing too hard. Go play over there. And so I was embarrassed because I didn't, I'm not a particularly hard player, but I wasn't playing with any finesse. And I came home and I had a different game. And then I went back out with my banging friends and they wanted to bang anyway. To slow down the game is a really hard thing to do. You're right. But that's where I think that's where all the finesse and the fun and the getting better at it comes when you start the dinking and the short game, because you're really learning something else. You're learning how to control the ball, and what your next 2 or 3 shots are going to be, instead of just banging it around. I noticed that if you go to a lot of say town courts and or indoor courts, and I'm talking about several places here near me, you can go to something called Player Lineup. And you go to playerlineup.com, and if you find a place near you, and they will have an open play. Now they may limit it to 36 people or 24 people, depending on their courts, maybe not. But most of them will have in each sign up of each 3 hours, usually a 3-hour session, all play, beginner play, intermediate play, or advanced play. And that way you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed if I go out and play with this bunch, and then when you feel a little better and you feel about yourself and your game, try the next level, and also I'm a really firm believer in you got to play up and you got to play down. Everybody in every sport wants to play up, right? You want to play with people who are better than you, who are going to teach you a couple of things, or you can just see with your own 2 eyes something that they do better than you do, and now you've maybe learned a trick. But one of the things also about pickleball that I think is unusual, I find that I'm a missionary. I want everybody to be out there having the joy and the fun that I'm having. I can't believe no one wants to join this fun, right? So part of that will be playing down. Part of that will be getting your friends to play with you who are beginners and see how it goes. Now, if everything works out right, it doesn't always. They will find, their own level, and they'll find some people that they can play with who they're comfortable with. They're not going to be calling you every week, and then you have to find an excuse of saying, can you come play with me? But I really think people continue to get better. So but it's a nice thing to do. It's a very kind and generous sport, I find.
I like the missionary, comparison. I guess once the Book of Mormon ends its run, there'll be the Book of Pickleball on Broadway.
Let's get it on the ground floor.
Tom Hanks made famous, "There's no crying in baseball." You may have coined a more interesting term. "There's no sorry in pickleball." Explain.
Well, I'll tell you, I did not coin that. The first day I played, and I think most people will say they hear it the first or second time they play. We are a nation of saying, I'm sorry about stuff. Oh, I'm sorry this, I'm sorry that, I'm sorry I don't have the right change, I'm sorry I stepped into whatever it is. And half the time you're not sorry at all. And now there's the famous sorry, not sorry. But it's, there's no sorry in pickleball. I mean, you're used to, if you miss a shot, you say, oh, sorry, because you've got a partner. And you want to do well for your partner as well. But it's sort of a mantra of pickleball. There's no saying you're sorry. You'll do it better next time. That's all. And you know what? I got to tell you, it's a great relief.
I also love the way the book ends. It's a diary for your personal pickleball journey. And to me, it was like it's almost like a call to action for anyone that's going to read this book. Like, all right, get out there. And it's also very ambitious, because not only that, it's got your pickleball tournament record, a place to put that in there. Why was it important for you to end the book with that section?
Well, I thought it would be fun, especially for people who are beginning, to have like as you say, a little diary at the end where you can keep track of. It's like if you've ever gotten an injury and every day you say to yourself, this is never going to get better. But then if you look back to 3 weeks ago, you think, you know what, I couldn't do this 3 weeks ago. So if you keep track of like some of the great people you play with, who you really like, what their cell phone number is, what kind of level you think they're at, tournaments that you've played in and what level you played at and where they are, favorite places you go to and what days are great days for the level you're playing at. All of that stuff you can go back and look at. And when you start seeing it in diary form and the passage of time, you'll see that that you've gotten better, that you don't play with that crowd anymore. You know what? Not because you've gotten to be a snob, but because you've moved on and you've gotten a little better. It's nice
Erin,
to be able to see the improvement on a page.
Erin, thanks so much for your time. Where is the best place for people to get a hold of this book?
You can get it anywhere. It should be at bookstores and gift stores anywhere. You can buy it online. If you're in my neighborhood, stop by. I've got a bunch in the trunk of the car.
Pickleball Central carrying it.
I just drive around in circles.
Erin McHugh, author of Pickleball is Life, the complete guide to feeding your obsession, available everywhere.